Daniel in the lion's den is one of the most popular stories in the Bible. It teaches us about the promises and faithfulness of God, even if we feel like everything has been lost. Who is Daniel? Why was he thrown into a lion's den? Why did he still survive despite the hungry lions? Now I will immediately lift the veil of mystery and reveal to you the whole truth about this famous story. My channel not only talks about Daniel's story, but I also analyze many other mysteries about the Bible. What I reveal will certainly turn your previous understanding of the Bible up and down. If you are interested in my next videos, please click the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell below. Thank you. Who is Daniel? Daniel is a character who appears in the Old Testament. He is the main character in the book, Daniel. Daniel was the leader of advisors during King Darius' period. According to the Hebrew Bible, Daniel was a noble Jewish youth of Jerusalem taken into captivity by Nebuchadnezzar I of Babylon, serving the king and his successors with loyalty and ability until the time of the Persian conqueror Cyrus, all the while remaining true to the God of Israel. The Medes and Persians overthrow Nebuchadnezzar, and the new king, Darius the Mede, appoints Daniel to high authority. Daniel was a devout Jew during the reign of King Darius. Darius was king of Persia around the 6th and 5th centuries BC. He was friendly to the Jews and even played an important role in rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem after its destruction by the Babylonians. The name Daniel comes from the Hebrew God is my judge. The meaning of Daniel's name is very appropriate for one who chose to please God rather than man. His attitude is similar to that of the Apostle Paul, who said, "For am I now seeking the approval of man, or God? Or am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ." Galatians 1:6. Believers can learn from these examples and say, along with the parents who named Daniel, "God is my judge." Daniel and his friends were faithful in their work and faithful to God. From their earliest days in Babylon, Daniel and his companions Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were characterized by simultaneous faithfulness in their duties and faithfulness to God. It is recorded that God gave these 4 young men knowledge and understanding in every kind of literature and wisdom. The king interviewed them all, the trainees, and among all of them, no one was found equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they began to serve in the king's court. In every matter of wisdom and understanding that the king consulted them about, he found them 10 times better than all the diviner priests and mediums in his entire kingdom. Daniel 1:17-20. Daniel was above reproach in his work. Many years passed, and Daniel continued serving each king in succession and rising through the ranks. Eventually, he was appointed to a high administrative position in the kingdom along with 2 others. But Daniel distinguished himself above the administrators and satraps because he had an extraordinary spirit, so the king planned to set him over the whole realm. Daniel 6:3. As a result, the other managers wanted to dishonor Daniel, but they could not find his fault. Daniel 6:1-3. It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. The satraps were made accountable to them, so that the king might not suffer loss. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Daniel was a godly and capable leader because his first allegiance was to his heavenly king. He was serving God rather than human rulers. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters. Colossians 3:23. King Darius was ruler over Babylon and had an appointment with several men to help him govern and lead. He had the wisdom to appoint Daniel as one of the top 3 administrators, and Daniel proved to be so excellent that the king intended to appoint him as ruler of the entire country. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel and his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel, unless it has something to do with the law of his God." Daniel 6:4-5. However, neither Daniel nor the king foresaw what was in store for this dedicated kingdom man. Daniel's steadfastness instilled jealousy among the other government officials. They despised him because he was magnificent, not because he was evil. This is a common reaction of the evil toward the pious. Cain slew Abel for what reason? Because Cain's deeds were bad where his brothers were righteous. 1 John 3:12. Do not be like Cain, who belonged to the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his actions were evil and his brothers were righteous. Do not be surprised, my brothers and sisters, if the world hates you. 1 John 3:12-13. Daniel was targeted and penalized for his faith. The officials did not like Daniel and did not want him in charge, so they devised a way to get rid of Daniel. They tried to establish a charge against Daniel, but he had been in the Babylonian administration for about 40 years at this point, and his ethical record was impeccable. There was almost no way they could charge Daniel. So what was the backup plan? They decided to exploit Daniel's faith. These men knew that Daniel served the God of Israel, so they attempted to uncover something against him about the law of his God. They told King Darius to make a new law in which people could worship and pray to only the king, and if they worshipped or prayed to other gods, they would be thrown into the den of lions. The starving lion would eat and kill the lawbreaker. So these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, "Make King Darius live forever." The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, your majesty, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered by the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. So King Darius put the decree in writing. Daniel 6:6-9. It's fascinating that Daniel's life had been such a consistent testimony to his faith in God that these officials were aware of his prayer regimen. It was a wonderful plan since it played on the king's vanity. They told King Darius to make a new law in which people could worship and pray to only the king, and if they worshipped or prayed to other gods, they would be thrown into the lion's den. The starving lion would eat and kill the lawbreaker. Your Majesty, we think it would be a fantastic idea for you to declare yourself good for a month, with all prayers dedicated to you. When Darius signed the written order, it became an irreversible law. Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Daniel 6:10. The law will be enacted within 30 days and cannot be changed once created in their legal system. It was unable to be changed once it was made. King Darius did not understand why his servants proposed such a strange law. However, he thought that their idea was not bad, so the king signed the law and the law was immediately implemented. Daniel had heard about the new law and he understood it, but committed in his heart to remain steadfast in his prayer and praise to the Lord. He did not let his adversaries down. They knew he'd be faithful to his God, and he was. Daniel did not make a huge production out of his objection to the unjust edict, nor did he flaunt his prayers. He merely returned to his home and prayed 3 times a day with his windows open toward Jerusalem, as he had done previously. No worldly mandate could keep him from carrying out his divine responsibilities. His outlook was similar to that of the apostles many years later. Peter and the other apostles replied, "We must obey God rather than human beings." Acts 5:29. Daniel's faith was unwavering. The administrators caught him in the act and then went to the king to report on Daniel's newly illegal activity. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. "Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den?" The king answered, "The decree stands by the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed." Then they said to the king, "Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day." When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Then the men went as a group to King Darius and said to him, "Remember, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed." So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. Daniel 6:11-18. Daniel's accusers were cowardly plotters, but they had the mighty law of the Medes and Persians on their side. When they told the king about Daniel, the king understood he'd been set up. The king was distressed because he cared about and respected Daniel. He tried everything he could to set Daniel free, but he couldn't break his law. He'd been misled into having his best administrator executed. Beaten, Darius had Daniel thrown into the lion's den, to what everyone assumed would be certain death. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him. And he could not sleep. Daniel 6:17-18. Unlike Nebuchadnezzar, Darius even paid homage to the true God and declared through the prisoner, "May your God, whom you continually serve, rescue you." Daniel 6:16. A pagan king who had never worshipped the Lord before was suddenly extolling him in the hopes that he would free his servant. Though from an earthly perspective, Daniel's situation looked hopeless. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" Daniel answered, "May the king live forever. My God sent his angel and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty." Daniel 6:19-22. Nobody was happier about Daniel's survival than King Darius. The next morning, he knew that Daniel's God was not like the gods of wood and stone. After witnessing the miracle, Daniel's God would not be trifled with. Daniel replied that because he was innocent, God's angel had shut the lions' mouths. Then Daniel reminded the king, "Before you I have not harmed," effectively declaring, "Your Majesty, the only thing I was guilty of was being devoted to my God." The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. Before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Then King Darius wrote to all the nations and peoples of every language in all the earth, "May you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed, and his dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions, so Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian." Daniel 6:23-28. Darius was relieved to get Daniel out of the den, and he unloaded his rage on the men who had falsely implicated Daniel. Then he threw the managers who had caused trouble into the cave. As a result, the lions devoured them. Their terrible execution was characteristic of a monarch's retribution in the ancient world. The king was overjoyed that Daniel was unharmed. Then the king restored Daniel to his position. Darius had realized that the other administrators had tricked him into making a law that would hurt Daniel, so he put into effect another law telling people to fear Daniel's God, saying, "I issue a decree that in all my royal dominion, people must tremble in fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and his dominion has no end. He rescues and delivers. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth, for he has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions." Daniel 6:26-27. Darius's proclamation recognizing the true God is a theological jewel that may have been written by one of the psalmists. This Gentile ruler, like Nebuchadnezzar before him, praised the living God who rescues and delivers and whose kingdom will never be destroyed. Although the Jewish people were in exile, God had not abandoned them. He was eager to receive praise from their captors. Thus Daniel prospered under Gentile rulers, serving as a message to Jewish readers of his book to remain faithful to God while Israel was under Gentile dominion. Righteousness in God's law. On the surface, the story of Daniel in the lion's den simply represents the power of faith in God. Daniel maintained his faith in God despite being attacked by powerful people. His faith brought about a miracle, saving him from a cruel death. But there may be other meanings to this story. First, let's start by analyzing the two types of law. The king was the most powerful and richest man in the region. He has the right to create laws when he finds them satisfactory, and to break them when he finds them unsatisfactory. However, the administrators easily manipulated King Darius to create a new law with the sole purpose of harming Daniel. The law is founded on the envy of the righteous, and what is built into this law is an immutable decree. As a result, The king could not prevent an innocent person from being harmed. The law prevented the king from acting like a good man. But there is another, higher law, the law of God. Although the king's law does not appear clearly in the painting, God's law does. God's law is expressed in compassion for the upright and virtuous. Daniel's faith was strong. It was so strong that the king's law, the law of men, tried to hinder the law of God, but still did not affect Daniel. Instead of following man's laws, Daniel chose to follow God's laws. God's law is in a realm where the king's power and wealth cannot reach, and it kept Daniel a man of exemplary integrity and integrity safe. What is the main lesson of Daniel in the lion's den? It's here that we see the first of 4 key lessons we can learn from Daniel. 1. God was the central aspect of Daniel's life. We learned that part of his daily regimen was to kneel in front of Jerusalem and pray to God 3 times a day. Of course, this is why he was thrown into the lion's den. As stated in point number 1, nothing was more important to Daniel than God. Daniel's entire existence centered around God. Christians in the modern era can learn from this example. Many people have heard the analogy of a bicycle wheel. For far too many Christians, God is merely another spoke, rather than the core portion around which all the spokes revolve. This was not the case with Daniel, and it should not be the case with us today in our Christian lives. Unfortunately, it is all too easy for God to slip from our minds for the majority of the day. When we pray before a meal or sit through a Bible lecture, He may simply enter our minds now and again. This is not how we should regard someone whose amazing grace rescues us daily. We are to love God with all of our hearts, souls, and minds. Don't reduce God to just being a part of your life. As demonstrated by Daniel's life, He must be the focal point of your life around which everything else revolves. Number 2, Daniel used his influence. Every day, as Christians, a great deal influences us. Some are negative, while others are good. As a result, we can influence others. Unfortunately, many Christians do not use their influence to further God's kingdom. It all begins with an example. If people cannot tell Christians differently from the rest of the world, we have failed to take the first crucial step. Take a peek at Daniel. After seeing Daniel saved from the lions, King Darius ruled that no one should worship anybody but the God of Daniel. Daniel once again used his influence in a very positive and powerful way. Number 3, Daniel didn't waver when hardships arose. The Bible makes it abundantly plain that if we follow Christ as we should, we will face persecution. Remember what I told you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you also, John 15:20. We mustn't capitulate or yield to the enemy's advances. We are to put on God's full armor so that we might repel the evil one's fire arrows, Ephesians 6:16. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one, Ephesians 6:16. Our primary goal, like Daniel's, should be whether we are serving and honoring God. His story encourages those who follow God to focus more on what say about them than what others say about them. His deliverance shows believers that God can rescue us even from the most impossible circumstances. And we can trust that sometimes those very impossible circumstances may be how God's name is made known to others. There are many other things to know from Daniel's story, which is recorded over 12 chapters. The whole book is an edifying reading for anyone who wants to be faithful in their work and wants to grow in their trust in God's faithfulness toward those who serve Him. What do you think about Daniel and his devotion to God? Do you believe that angels appeared and rescued Daniel while he was in the lion's den? What thoughts does Daniel's story bring to you? What can we see from the story? I look forward to receiving your most honest sharing about this story in the comments section. Don't forget to like and share this video with your family and friends and discuss this story with them. Thank you for watching, and God bless you. Amen.